47 seconds. That's how long Arya Winters stood in the bloodstone fighting ring before she had to make an impossible choice, die as a human, or reveal the secret that had kept her alive for 7 years. She chose survival, and in doing so, she caught the attention of the most powerful alpha in North America. But to understand why this moment changed everything, we need to go back 3 months to a cold October morning on a highway, cutting through the Montana wilderness. Arya Winters was 23 years old when the raiders took her. She had been living quietly in Boulder, Colorado for 8 months, working the early shift at Rosie's Diner on Canyon Boulevard. She served coffee at 5 in the morning, smiled at truckers who left dollar tips, and never stayed anywhere long enough to make friends. That was the rule. Never get close. Never let anyone look too carefully. Never ever give them a reason to wonder what you really are. On that October morning, she was riding a Greyhound bus heading north to Missoula. She had saved $640 in cash. Everything she owned stuffed into a worn backpack wedged under her seat. The bus carried 11 other passengers. An elderly couple in the front row, a young mother with a sleeping baby, a college kid with headphones, a businessman tapping on his laptop. None of them were shifters, Arya could tell. After 7 years of hiding among humans, she had learned to identify her own kind by scent, by the way they carried themselves, by the barely perceptible tension in their shoulders. When the moon was full, she sat in the back row, forehead pressed against the cold window, watching pine forests blur past. The sky was the color of old steel. Snow would come soon. Maybe she would find work at a ski resort, kitchen staff, housekeeping, something anonymous. The bus driver, a heavy-set man in his 50s, was humming along to country music on the radio. The heater rattled and wheezed, pumping lukewarm air through the vents. Arya was almost asleep when the truck appeared. It came from a logging road, hidden in the trees, a massive black pickup with reinforced bumpers and tinted windows. It swerved onto the highway directly in front of the bus, forcing the driver to slam on the brakes. The bus shuddered in fishtail tires screaming against asphalt. Arya's backpack shot forward, hitting the seat in front of her. The mother's baby started crying. The businessman's laptop clattered to the floor. The bus driver leaned on the horn, shouting curses. But the truck didn't move. It sat there blocking both lanes. Then the doors opened. 6 men climbed out. They wore hunting jackets and boots, but these weren't hunters. Arya could see it in the way they moved, coordinated and predatory. 4 of them were shifters. She caught the scent of wolf, bitter and aggressive. Her heart kicked hard against her ribs. The leader was a thick-shouldered man with a shaved head and a scar running from his left eye to his jaw. He walked up to the bus door and banged on it with the butt of a shotgun. The bus driver opened the door. He tried to sound authoritative. "Sir, you need to move your vehicle. You're blocking the highway." The scarred man smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. "Everyone off the bus, now. Now hold on, you can't just..." The shotgun came up, aimed at the driver's face. "I said now." The elderly couple in the front row started to cry. The businessman raised his hands slowly. The college kid pulled off his headphones, eyes wide with fear. Arya remained very still. She made herself small, shoulders hunched, head down. Just another frightened human. Nothing special. Nothing worth noticing. The raiders herded all 12 passengers off the bus and lined them up on the shoulder of the highway. The wind was cold and sharp, carrying the smell of ice and pine. The mother clutched her baby, whispering prayers. The elderly man's hands shook. The scarred leader walked down the line, studying each person like livestock at an auction. He stopped in front of the businessman. "Wallet." The man handed it over. The raider flipped it open, counted the cash and tossed the empty wallet into the ditch. He moved on to the college kid, then the elderly couple. When he reached Arya, he paused. He leaned in close, inhaling deeply. She kept her eyes on the ground, heart hammering so hard she was certain he could hear it. "You got anything worth taking, girl?" "No, sir." she whispered. Just my backpack. Some clothes. He stared at her for a long moment. Then he grunted and moved on. Behind him, the other raiders were sorting through the passengers. Two of them grabbed the businessman and the college kid, hauling them toward a second truck that had pulled up from the logging road. These two go to the work camp, the scarred leader said. Strong enough to swing a hammer. He pointed at the mother. She's pretty. Pleasure House in Spokane will pay decent for her. The woman started screaming. One of the raiders clamped a hand over her mouth and dragged her away. Baby's cries echoed across the empty highway. The elderly couple, the bus driver, and 3 other passengers were pushed back toward the bus. You people get to live. Tell anyone about this and we'll find you. Understand? They nodded frantically. The scarred leader turned to Arya. He gestured to one of the other raiders, a lean man with cold eyes. What about this one? The lean man looked Arya up and down. He shrugged. Skinny, weak, not worth much. Bloodstones always looking for fighters, mark a space for bodies, even worthless ones. Crowd likes watching the weak ones die. Arya's blood turned to ice. The lean man grabbed her arm, fingers digging in hard enough to bruise. Come on! She stumbled after him, legs barely holding her up. They threw her into the back of a cargo van along with the businessman, the college kid, and the mother still clutching her baby. The doors slammed shut. Darkness swallowed them. The engine roared to life. The van lurched forward. In the suffocating blackness, the mother sobbed. The businessman was praying under his breath. The college kid said nothing, but Arya could hear him hyperventilating. She pressed her back against the cold metal wall and closed her eyes. Bloodstone. They were taking her to Bloodstone. She knew that name. Every shifter in North America knew that name. Bloodstone Pack controlled a chunk of territory along the Montana-Idaho border. They were notorious, brutal. They ran fighting rings, illegal gambling operations, trafficking networks that stretched from Seattle to Denver. Alpha Marcus Stone had built an empire on blood and fear, and Arya was being delivered straight into his hands. The van drove for hours. When it finally stopped, rough hands dragged them out into blinding daylight. Arya blinked, vision swimming. They were in some kind of compound. Concrete buildings surrounded by chain-link fences topped with razor wire. Guard towers at each corner. Men with rifle patrolling the perimeter. The scarred leader from the highway was there talking to a man in a black coat. Money changed hands. Documents were signed. Then the new arrivals were sorted again. The businessman and college kid were hauled off to the left toward a barracks-style building. The mother and baby were taken to the right toward what looked like living quarters. Arya and 4 other people, all human, all looking terrified, were pushed toward a different building. A low bunker-like structure, half buried in the earth. The entrance was a heavy steel door. It screeched open, revealing a concrete staircase descending into darkness. They were forced down. The air grew colder with each step, thick with the smell of sweat, blood, and despair. At the bottom was a corridor lined with cages. Each cage was 6 feet by 6 feet, constructed from iron bars welded together. Not all of them were occupied at first, but some cages held 2 or 3 people crammed together. By Arya's calculation, there were 37 cages total. The prisoners looked up as the new arrivals were brought in. Their faces were hollow eyes dead. A guard, a heavy-set shifter with greasy hair, unlocked an empty cage and shoved Arya inside. The door clanged shut behind her. A padlock clicked into place. "Welcome to Bloodstone," the guard said, grinning. "Hope you said your prayers." Then he walked away, his laughter echoing down the corridor. Arya stood in the center of the cage, heart pounding, mind racing. The floor was bare concrete, stained with old bloodstains. There was a bucket in one corner for waste. A thin moth-eaten blanket lay crumpled against the back wall. No pillow, no mattress, nothing. She sank down onto the floor, pulled her knees to her chest, and tried to think. Stay calm, stay human. Don't let them know what you are. If they discovered she was a shifter, if they found out she was a white wolf, they wouldn't throw her into the fighting ring. They would sell her. White wolves were worth millions. Collectors paid fortunes for their pelts, for the bragging rights of owning something that rare. So she would stay human. She would suppress her wolf the way she had for 7 years. She would be weak, unremarkable, forgettable. She would survive. 3 months. Arya spent 3 months in that cage. Every morning at 6, a guard came through with bowls of thin, watery gruel. 1 bowl per cage. Lukewarm, tasteless, barely enough to keep a person alive. Every night the temperature dropped to 38 degrees Fahrenheit. The concrete floor leached heat from her body. The single blanket was useless. She huddled in the corner, teeth chattering, counting the hours until dawn. By Arya's 3rd month, every cage was full and more prisoners arrived weekly. Some cages held single occupants, others held 2 or 3 people crammed together. The compound processed a constant stream of human misery. Some of the prisoners talked to each other through the bars. They shared names, stories, fragments of hope. Others stayed silent, staring at nothing. Arya fell somewhere in between. She listened. She learned. The woman in the cage to her right was named Margaret Ross. Everyone called her Maggie. She was 42 years old, with graying brown hair and tired eyes. She had been a school teacher in Boise. She had 2 kids, a son and a daughter, both in elementary school. She had been driving home from a parent-teacher conference when raiders ambushed her car. "They're waiting for me," Maggie would whisper at night. "My kids. They don't know where I am. They must be so scared." Arya wanted to tell her it would be okay, but she couldn't lie like that. The man in the cage to her left was younger, maybe 25. His name was Owen. He didn't talk much. He just sat with his back to the bars, staring at the floor. He had been hiking in Glacier National Park when raiders grabbed him. And then there was Cade Morrison. Cade wasn't in a cage. He lived in a different part of the compound in what the guards called the Champion's Quarters. He was Bloodstone's star fighter, the undefeated champion of the arena. Arya first saw him on her 4th day. He was being escorted through the corridor by 3 armed guards. He was massive easily, 6'7", with shoulders like a linebacker and arms thick with muscle. His face was a map of scars, a jagged line across his forehead, a puckered mark on his left cheek, another on his jaw. His eyes were dark and empty. He didn't look at the prisoners as he walked past. He didn't acknowledge their existence. He just moved like a machine following the guards' orders. Later, Arya would learn his story from the whispers that passed between cages. Cade had been a soldier once, Army Ranger, 3 tours overseas. He came home with PTSD and a drinking problem, lost his job, lost his apartment, ended up drifting through the Northwest trying to outrun his demons. Marcus Stone found him sleeping under a bridge in Coeur d'Alene. Marcus saw potential. A broken man with the skills to fight and the emptiness to obey. Marcus made Cade an offer. Fight in the rings and Marcus would take care of Cade's younger sister Bryn. 15 years old. No other family. No one to protect her. So Cade fought and he won. Again and again and again. 23 people had died in the arena at Cade's hands. 23 human prisoners thrown into the ring with a trained killer forced to fight for the entertainment of wolves who bet on how long they would last. Cade never spoke to the prisoners, never met their eyes. He just did what he was told, because if he didn't, Marcus would hurt Bryn. Arya learned to recognize the pattern. Every few days, the guards would come and open one of the cages. They would drag someone out kicking and screaming. The prisoner would be taken upstairs, and they never came back. Arya kept count by scratching marks into the concrete wall with a pebble. 17 prisoners went up those stairs during her 3 months. 17 people who never returned. On Arya's 87th day in the cage, they took Maggie. It was a Thursday morning. The guard, the greasy-haired one, unlocked Maggie's cage around noon. "You're up, Grandma. Time to entertain the crowd." Maggie started crying. Please, I have kids. They need me. Please don't do this." The guard laughed. He grabbed her by the hair and hauled her out. She tried to fight, clawing at his hands, but she was weak from malnutrition. He dragged her down the corridor like a sack of trash. Her screams echoed long after she was gone. Arya sat in her cage, fists clenched, nails digging into her palms. She could feel her wolf stirring beneath her skin, furious, desperate to break free, to shift, to fight back. But she couldn't. If she shifted, they would know, and then everything would be worse. So she stayed human. She stayed weak. She stayed silent. That night around 10, one of the guards came through with dinner, bowls of cold stew. He tossed them into the cages carelessly. "Good show tonight," he said to no one in particular. The old lady lasted longer than expected. Almost 2 minutes before Morrison ripped her throat out. He laughed and walked away. Arya didn't eat her stew. She stared at the bowl until the dim lights in the corridor went out, plunging the cages into darkness. 2 minutes. Maggie had lasted 2 minutes. Days blurred together. Weeks passed. The cold deepened as November bled into December. Arya's body grew thinner. Her ribs began to show. Her clothes hung loose. She overheard guards talking sometimes. Snippets of conversation that filtered down to the cages. AlphaKing Dominic Blackthorne was coming to visit. Some kind of inspection. Marcus was throwing a special event to impress him. A fight night bigger than usual. Higher stakes. More blood. On the morning of December 15th, exactly 3 months after Arya had been taken, the greasy-haired guard appeared at her cage. He looked her up and down, grinning. "Today's your lucky day, sweetheart. You're going upstairs." Arya's heart stopped. "No," she whispered. "Please." "Begging won't help," the guard said cheerfully. He unlocked the cage and grabbed her arm. "Come on." She tried to pull away. Her legs wobbled. She fell to her knees. The guard dragged her upright and shoved her forward. She stumbled into the corridor. The other prisoners watched in silence. Owen stared at her with hollow eyes. A teenage girl in the cage across from hers started crying. They hauled Arya up the concrete stairs through a maze of hallways and into a preparation room. It was brightly lit and sterile with white tile floors and metal tables. A man in a blood-stained apron stood waiting. He looked her over and shook his head. "This one, she's skin and bones, won't last 30 seconds. "Boss's orders," the guard said. "The AlphaKing is here. Marcus wants a good show. Human versus Morrison." The man in the apron sighed. "Fine, strip her down and hose her off. Can't have her looking like a corpse when she goes out there." They forced Arya into a corner and blasted her with freezing water from a hose. She gasped, choking, shivering violently. They gave her a rough towel to dry off and a thin white tunic to wear. No shoes, no undergarments, just the tunic. Then they dragged her to a holding pen, a small cage, just outside the arena entrance. She could hear the crowd above, hundreds of voices, shouting, laughing, betting. She could smell them too. Wolves, so many wolves. The scent of aggression and bloodlust was overwhelming. A door opened across from her holding pen. Cade Morrison stepped out. He was in human form, but barely. His eyes glowed amber. His muscles were tense, coiled, ready to shift at any moment. He wore torn pants and nothing else. His chest was a canvas of scars. He looked at Arya for the first time. Really looked at her. For just a second, something flickered in his eyes. Not quite pity, not quite regret. Something human. Then, it was gone. A voice boomed over a loudspeaker amplified by the acoustics of the arena. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to tonight's special exhibition presented in honor of AlphaKing Dominic Blackthorne." Cheers erupted. Thunderous applause. "Tonight we have a treat for you. A battle between our undefeated champion, Cade the Reaper Morrison, and a human prisoner." More cheers, louder this time. "Let's see how long she lasts." The gate in front of Arya's holding pen creaked open. A guard shoved her forward. "Move." She walked out into the blinding lights of the arena. The space was circular, perhaps 50 feet across. The floor was packed, sand-stained dark with old blood. Walls rose 15 feet high, topped with barriers to prevent fighters from escaping. Above that tiered seating held at least 500 wolves, all on their feet, screaming and pounding their fists. At the far end of the arena, in a raised box with the best view, sat a man who could only be Alpha King Dominic Blackthorne. Even from across the arena, even terrified and knowing she was about to die, Arya felt the impact of his presence. He was perhaps 35 with dark hair that fell past his shoulders and eyes that were a striking pale blue. He wore a black shirt and dark pants, no jewelry, no ostentatious displays of wealth. But power radiated from him in waves so strong that every wolf in the arena was subtly oriented toward him, instinct recognizing absolute dominance. His eyes found Arya the moment she stumbled into the arena, and something strange happened. His expression shifted from mild interest to shock to something that looked almost like horror. He leaned forward in his seat, his entire body going tense, his gaze locked on her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. But there was no time to wonder why the Alpha King was staring at her. The opposite gate opened. Cade Morrison entered the arena. He shifted mid-stride. His body exploded into wolf form, bones cracking and reforming, muscles expanding. Within seconds, a massive dark grey wolf stood where the man had been. He was easily 320 pounds larger than any normal wolf. His fur was dark, his eyes amber and empty. He charged. Arya ran. She didn't think. She just ran. Her bare feet slipped on the sand. Her legs screamed in protest. She was weak, starved, exhausted. But adrenaline pushed her forward. The crowd loved it. They laughed and jeered, watching her scramble across the arena like prey. Cade was playing with her. She realized he could have caught her in seconds. But he circled her instead, letting her tire herself out, letting the fear build. Arya's lungs burned, her vision blurred. She couldn't keep running. She couldn't keep evading. In seconds, Cade would tire of the game. He would lunge. He would sink his teeth into her throat, and she would die. Unless she shifted, unless she revealed what she truly was, unless she chose survival over secrecy. Cade lunged. His jaws snapped shut inches from her leg. Arya stumbled, fell hard on the sand, rolled to avoid the next attack. The wolf was on top of her in an instant, his weight crushing his breath hot against her face. She could see every tooth in his open mouth, could feel death closing in. And in that moment, Arya made her choice. She would rather reveal her secret and die as herself than pretend to be human while being torn apart. Her wolf surged forward for the first time in 7 years, answering her desperate need with power that had only grown stronger during its long suppression. The shift took her with explosive force. Her body transformed. Bones lengthened. Muscles expanded. White fur erupted across her skin. The arena fell silent. Where a frail human girl had been a massive white wolf now stood. Her fur was pure silver white, unmarked by any other color, gleaming under the arena lights like fresh snow under moonlight. Her eyes were pale luminous blue, holding power and intelligence that marked her as something far beyond a normal shifter. And her size rivaled Cade's, her presence radiating strength that came from bloodline, from suppressed potential, finally released. Arya snarled. The sound carried primal warning, ancient and absolute. Cade backed up a step. The champion fighter who had killed 23 people without hesitation hesitated when faced with a white wolf. The crowd erupted, but not with cheers, with shock, with avarice, with the realization that what they were witnessing was impossibly rare. Voices rose in a cacophony of disbelief and greed. White wolf! Impossible! Do you know what she's worth? Capture her alive! Arya stood in the center of the arena, by its heaving eyes blazing. She felt powerful for the first time in 7 years. Whole, complete. And she felt something else. A pull, a warmth in her chest. A connection that snapped into place like a key turning in a lock. Her eyes found the Alpha King's box. Dominic Blackthorne was on his feet, hands gripping the railing so hard his knuckles were white.
His pale blue eyes blazed with power and possessiveness that bordered on violence. And then he spoke.
One word, but it carried such command, such undeniable alpha authority, that every wolf in the arena instantly fell silent and still. Minyi. The word echoed across the arena like thunder. Dominic's voice rang out again, clear and absolute. That wolf is mine. She is my mate. Anyone who touches her answers to me. Anyone who harms her dies. Is that understood? The silence that followed was total. Mate bonds were sacred, recognized by all packs as unbreakable and inviolate. An alpha king claiming his mate carried weight that superseded any other consideration, even the fortune a white wolf represented. But Arya barely heard any of it, because in that moment the warmth in her chest exploded into certainty. The connection she felt to this stranger was real, undeniable. The mate bond. Her wolf recognized him, knew him, wanted him with an instinct so powerful it was almost painful. But her human mind was slower, confused, terrified. She swayed on her feet. The adrenaline was fading. The shift had taken more energy than she possessed. Her vision began to blur. The wound on her shoulder from Cade's earlier attack was bleeding again, crimson staining her white fur. She saw Dominic vault over the railing of his box. He fell 20 feet and landed in the arena without difficulty, his body absorbing the impact with supernatural grace. He crossed the sand toward her, his movements careful, his hands visible and empty. "I can feel the bond," he said, his voice gentle despite the power radiating from him. "Can you feel it too? The recognition, the certainty, the knowledge that you are mine and I am yours." Arya wanted to shift back to human form, wanted to speak, wanted to demand explanations for claims that made no sense. But she had been suppressing her wolf for 7 years, and the shift had taken everything she had left. She was locked in wolf form until she recovered, unable to transform back. She settled for nodding, slowly acknowledging that, yes, she felt something. A pull toward this alpha king that defied logic. A sense of rightness that she did not understand but could not deny. Dominic stopped several feet away, close enough to speak softly, but far enough not to spook her. "I'm going to get you out of here," he said. "Away from these rings, away from Bloodstone, somewhere safe where you can rest and recover and we can talk properly. Will you trust me enough to allow that?" Arya looked at him, at the sincerity in his eyes, at the fury barely contained beneath his careful calm. Then she looked at the crowd surrounding them, at Alpha Marcus Stone, whose greed was written clearly on his face, at the guards lining the arena walls all armed, at Cade who was still standing nearby looking confused about whether to continue fighting. She had no good options. She could stay here and be captured, sold, killed. Or she could trust an Alpha King who claimed she was his mate. A claim she did not fully understand but that might represent her only chance at survival. Arya took a careful step toward Dominic, then another. The crowd murmured at this display of trust, a white wolf approaching an alpha without aggression. When she was close enough, Dominic slowly extended his hand. "I am going to touch you now. Just my hand on your head. I need to establish the claim publicly so no one questions my right to take you. Is that acceptable?" Arya lowered her head slightly, granting permission. Dominic's hand settled on her fur between her ears. The moment of contact sent a shock of recognition through both of them. The mate bond, acknowledged and accepted, surged into fuller existence. Dominic's eyes fluttered closed briefly. His hand tightened in her fur. When he opened them again, they blazed with possessive certainty. He looked up at Alpha Marcus's Stone, at the guards, lining the arena walls, at every wolf present. "This wolf is mine by right of mate bond," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the arena. "I am taking her into my custody. Anyone who objects can take it up with me personally. Anyone who tries to follow or interfere will be considered an enemy of the crown and dealt with accordingly." His voice carried absolute authority. No one moved to stop them. No one dared. An Alpha King claiming his mate was untouchable, unquestionable. and Dominic's power was such that even wolves, high on greed and bloodlust, knew better than to challenge him. Dominic kept his hand on Arya's head as he guided her toward one of the arena gates. Warriors in his colors appeared, forming a protective formation around them. They moved through the tunnels beneath the arena, past the cages, where other prisoners watched in shocked silence, through passages that smelled of blood and death and suffering. They emerged into the cold December night, where horses and guards waited. Dominic's men had clearly been prepared for his potential departure, though they looked surprised at the massive white wolf he was bringing with him. One guard spoke carefully. "My lord, can she travel in that form? Should we arrange a cart?" "She stays with me," Dominic said firmly. He looked at Arya. "Can you run or do you need to ride?" Arya tested her legs. They were shaky but functional. She could run, would prefer to run rather than be caged again, even in a cart meant for her protection. She moved to stand beside Dominic's massive black warhorse, indicating she would keep pace on foot. He nodded approval and mounted. Then he signaled his warriors to move out. They rode through the night, leaving Bloodstone territory at a speed that suggested urgency. Arya ran beside Dominic's horse, her white wolf form, drawing stares from every guard, but no one questioning her presence. The connection between them deepened with every mile, warm and inevitable, the beginning of something neither of them fully understood yet. As dawn broke over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Arya felt something she had not felt in 7 years. Hope. Not much, just a flicker, but it was there. She had been thrown into a fighting ring to die. Instead, she had transformed to survive, and an Alpha King had claimed her as his mate. Nothing made sense. Everything had changed, and Arya had no idea what would happen next. But for the first time since her family died, she was not alone, and maybe, just maybe, that would be enough. Day 1. Iron Peak. They rode through the night and into the next day, stopping only twice to rest the horses. Arya ran the entire distance, her white wolf form drawing power from somewhere deep inside that she had forgotten existed. The bond with Dominic pulled her forward, a compass pointing toward safety she did not yet fully trust. By the time they reached the border of Iron Peak territory, the sun was setting again. 24 hours had passed since the arena. 24 hours since everything changed. The fortress appeared gradually as they climbed higher into the mountains. First distant walls of grey stone rising from the peaks, then watchtowers with banners snapping in the wind. Finally, the full scope of Iron Peak revealed itself, a city carved into living granite, 800 years old and absolutely impregnable. 2,000 wolves lived here. Arya could sense them as they approached. The sheer concentration of power made her fur stand on end. The main gates opened at Dominic's approach. Guards saluted. Warriors lined the streets, staring openly at the white wolf running beside their king's horse. Whispers followed them like wind. Dominic guided his horse through the fortress to a private courtyard behind the main keep. High walls surrounded them on all sides. Guards took up positions at the entrances, discreet but vigilant. Dominic dismounted. He approached Arya, slowly giving her space. "You have been running for 24 hours, he said quietly. "You need to rest, to recover enough to shift back. I have quarters prepared for you. Food, medical attention if you need it." Arya's legs were trembling. Now that they had stopped, exhaustion hit her like a physical blow. She had been surviving on adrenaline and desperation. Both were running out. She tried to shift back to human form. Her body shuddered fur, rippling, but nothing happened. She was still locked in wolf form, too drained to complete the transformation. Dominic seemed to understand. "It is all right. Take your time. When you are ready, someone will bring you clothes." He gestured to a doorway leading into the keep. Arya followed on unsteady legs. They climbed a spiral staircase to the highest floor of the tower. Dominic opened a heavy wooden door. The rooms beyond were larger and more luxurious than anywhere Arya had ever lived. High ceilings, windows overlooking the valley, furniture that spoke of wealth she could barely comprehend. A massive bed with thick blankets, A fireplace, already burning, filling the space with warmth. "These are yours," Dominic said. "You are free to come and go as you please within Iron Peak. I will assign guards for your protection, but they will be discreet. You are not a prisoner here, Arya. You are my mate and potentially my queen. Everyone will treat you accordingly." He moved toward the door, then paused. "I will have food brought up, and Dr. Rebecca Hayes, our pack physician. She will check your injuries. Try to rest." Then he left, closing the door quietly behind him. Arya stood in the center of the room, her white wolf form stark against the rich carpets. She felt disoriented, overwhelmed. 12 hours ago, she had been in a cage waiting to die. Now she stood in a queen's chambers. A knock came at the door. A young woman entered carrying folded clothes. She set them on the bed, eyes wide. "My lady," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I am Cora. If you need anything at all, please let me know." She curtsied and left quickly. Arya approached the bed. She tried again to shift, focusing every ounce of remaining strength. This time her body responded. The transformation was slow and painful, but she managed it. She collapsed onto the floor in human form, gasping. Her shoulder throbbed where Cade had injured her. Her muscles screamed. She was covered in dirt and dried blood. But she was human again. She could speak. She could think clearly, without the wolf's instincts overwhelming her thoughts. She pulled herself upright and looked down at her body. She was emaciated, ribs showing, bruises covering her arms and legs. 3 months of malnutrition and abuse written on her skin. Another knock. A woman in her 50s entered, carrying a medical bag. She had kind eyes and grey hair pulled back in a practical bun. "I am Dr. Rebecca Hayes," she said. "May I examine you?" Arya nodded, too tired to speak. Dr. Hayes worked efficiently. She cleaned the wound on Arya's shoulder, applied ointment, and bandaged it carefully. She checked Arya's vital signs, examined the bruises, and asked questions in a gentle voice. "When did you last eat a full meal?" "I do not remember," Arya whispered. "How much blood did you lose in the arena?" "I do not know." "A lot." Dr. Hayes made notes. "You lost approximately 40% of your blood volume. Without Alpha Blackthorn's blood, you would have died. As it is, you need rest, nutrition, and time to heal. No strenuous activity for at least a week." "Understood." Arya nodded. More food arrived. Not gruel, real food. Roasted chicken, fresh bread, vegetables, fruit. Arya ate slowly, her stomach protesting after months of starvation, but she forced herself to consume as much as she could. Dr. Hayes stayed until Arya finished eating. Then she packed her bag and stood. "Sleep now," she said. "I will check on you tomorrow." When she left, Arya finally allowed herself to collapse onto the bed. The mattress was soft. The blankets were warm. The room was safe. For the first time in 3 months, she was not in a cage. She fell asleep before she could process what that meant. Day 2. First conversation. When Arya woke, sunlight was streaming through the windows. She sat up slowly, disoriented. Her shoulder ached, but the pain was manageable. Someone had placed a tray of breakfast on the table near the bed. Fresh biscuits, eggs, bacon, tea. She ate everything. As she finished, there was a knock at the door. Dominic entered. He looked at her carefully, as though checking for signs of distress. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Sore, confused, but alive." Arya's voice was still rough from disuse. Dominic pulled a chair over and sat across from her. He kept a respectful distance. "We need to talk," he said. "About what happened, about the mate bond, about what comes next." Arya wrapped her arms around herself. "You called me your mate in front of hundreds of witnesses. Why?" "Because you are," Dominic said simply. "I felt the bond the moment you entered that arena, before you shifted, while you still appeared to be human. My wolf recognized yours despite your suppression, despite the distance, despite everything." "You do not know me," Arya protested. "You do not know anything about me except that I was in a fighting ring and I am a white wolf." That is not enough basis for a mate bond. The bond does not require a basis, Dominic said. It simply is. You felt it too, did you not, when I touched you? The certainty, the recognition, the knowledge that something fundamental had clicked into place. Arya wanted to deny it, but she could not lie about something so obvious. Yes, I felt it. But feeling something does not mean I have to act on it, she continued. I did not ask to be your mate. I did not ask for any of this. No, Dominic said, his voice hardening. You asked to be thrown into a fighting ring and forced to reveal yourself to survive. He leaned forward. Tell me, Arya, how long were you in those cages? 3 months. And before that, how long have you been hiding what you are? Arya looked away. 7 years. Since hunters killed my family and I ran. Tell me what happened, Dominic said quietly. So she did. The words came slowly at first, then faster like a dam breaking. She told him about her family. Her father, Alpha Jared Winters, who led a small pack in the Colorado mountains. Her mother, Elena, who taught Arya to read and paint. Her 3 younger siblings, Thomas 14, Caroline 12, Anna 9. She told him about the night they died. October 10th, 7 years ago, a full moon. Arya had been 16 years old. The hunters came at midnight, 15 men with silver bullets and burning torches. They surrounded the cabin. Her father fought, shifted and took down 4 hunters before they brought him down with a hail of bullets. Her mother tried to protect the younger children. She died in front of them, shot through the heart with a silver-tipped arrow. Thomas and Caroline tried to run. They made it 50 yards before the hunters caught them. Arya had heard their screams from where she was hiding in the root cellar where her father had shoved her moments before he died. Anna, the youngest, never even shifted. She had not come of age yet. The hunters killed her anyway, shot her like an animal, and left her body in the dirt. Arya stayed in that cellar for 6 hours listening to the hunters search the house. She heard them laughing, heard them talking about the pelts they would sell, heard them discussing the bounty on white wolves. When they finally left, she emerged into silence. Her family was gone, the cabin was destroyed, and she was alone. Her father's last words echoed in her mind. Run, Arya, never shift, never tell anyone what you are. So she ran. For 7 years she ran. She suppressed a wolf completely, lived as human, moved every few months, worked cash jobs that did not require identification, trusted no one, spoke to no one, existed in the spaces between invisible and unremarkable, until the raiders took her, until she was thrown into a cage, until she was forced into that arena. By the time Arya finished speaking, her face was wet with tears. She had not realized she was crying. Dominic was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was pained. You have been alone and terrified for 7 years, living in constant fear of discovery. And then you were captured and thrown into a nightmare where you had to choose between certain death or revealing your secret. Yet Pedres, Arya said simply. So you can understand why I am not immediately thrilled about this mate bond. She continued. I have spent 7 years trusting no one, depending on no one, surviving alone. And now you are asking me to trust an Alpha King I do not know, to accept a bond I do not understand, to believe that somehow this will be better than what I had before. Dominic stood and walked to the window. He stared out at the valley for several seconds. What you had before was a slow death, he said bluntly, suppressing your wolf for 7 years, never allowing yourself to be whole, living in constant fear. That is not a life, Arya. That is existing. He turned to face her. I am offering you something better, safety, protection, a place where you never have to hide or suppress your nature again. And what are you offering exactly? Arya demanded. Safety, protection. How many others have promised me those things before taking everything I had? Why should I believe you are different? Dominic was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was serious. I cannot make you believe me. I can only show you through action that I mean what I say. But Arya, you are my mate. That means something to me, something sacred. I will protect you. I will provide for you. I will ensure you never have to hide or suppress your nature again. That is not a negotiation or a conditional offer. That is simply what is going to happen. And if I refuse the bond, Arya asked, if I want to leave once I recover? The words clearly pained him. Then I will let you go. I will not cage you or force you to stay, but I will ask that you give me a chance. Give the bond a chance. Give yourself a chance to see what life could be like when you are not running and hiding and afraid. Arya studied him, trying to determine if he was sincere or simply skilled at manipulation. Her instincts said he was being honest, that the mate bond was real, that his offer of protection was genuine. But 7 years of hiding had taught her that instincts could be wrong, that trust was dangerous. I will stay, she said finally, long enough to recover and assess whether what you are saying is true. But I am not promising to accept the mate bond. I am not promising to stay permanently. I am just agreeing not to run immediately. Relief flashed across Dominic's face. That is more than I expected given what you have endured. Thank you for giving me a chance. He moved toward the door, then paused. There is something else you need to know. I have been investigating Bloodstone for the past 6 months. The trafficking networks, the fighting rings. I was at that arena not for entertainment but to gather intelligence on Marcus's operations. Meeting you there was fate intervening in my mission. Arya's eyes widened. You were already investigating them. Yes, and now that I have seen the extent of their crimes firsthand, I intend to dismantle everything Marcus has built. Every cage will be opened, every prisoner freed, and Marcus himself will face justice for what he has done. After he left, Arya sat on the bed trying to process everything. An AlphaKing who had been secretly investigating the very place she was imprisoned, who wanted justice not just for her, but for all the prisoners. It was almost too much to believe, but the mate bond between them hummed softly, a constant reminder that perhaps, just perhaps, she had found something real. Days 310, Recovery and Discovery. Over the next week, Arya barely left her rooms. She slept, she ate, she allowed her body to heal. Dr. Hayes visited daily, checking her progress, adjusting her bandages, prescribing nutrients to rebuild her strength. On day 4, Arya felt strong enough to explore. She dressed in clothes that had been provided simple but well made, and ventured out into the fortress. Iron Peak was extraordinary. Stone corridors carved by master craftsmen centuries ago. Courtyards filled with training warriors. Markets where vendors sold everything from weapons to fresh bread. Children ran through the streets laughing and playing. It felt like a real community, not a prison, not a dictatorship, a place where people lived and worked and raised families. Arya walked through it all, hyper-aware of the stares that followed her. Everyone knew who she was, the White Wolf, the AlphaKing's mate. Word had spread fast. Some wolves bowed their heads respectfully as she passed. Others stared openly, curiosity written on their faces. A few looked skeptical, suspicious. She found herself in the central training grounds where warriors practiced combat. Beta Garrison Wade was there, a broad-shouldered man in his late 20s, with sandy hair and sharp eyes. He was directing a sparring session between 2 younger wolves. When he saw Arya, he approached and bowed slightly. "Lady Arya, I am Beta Wade. If you need anything, please let me know." "Actually," Arya said, "I would like to train." Garrison raised an eyebrow. "The king said you need to rest." "I have been resting for 4 days. I'm going insane sitting in that room. I need to move, to do something." Garrison studied her. Then he nodded. "All right, but we start slow. Your body is still recovering." They began with basic stretches, then footwork, then light sparring. Arya was shocked by how weak she was. 7 years of suppressing her wolf had left her depleted. 3 months of starvation had made it worse. She could barely last 5 minutes before she was gasping for breath. Garrison called a halt. "That is enough for today. You pushed too hard." Arya wanted to argue, but he was right. Her legs were shaking. Her shoulder throbbed. "Tomorrow we will go again," Garrison said. "A little longer each day. You will rebuild your strength, but it will take time. As they spoke, Dominic appeared at the edge of the training grounds. He had been watching. Arya could see the concern in his eyes, but he did not intervene, did not try to stop her from training, just observed. That restraint meant something to Arya. He was giving her autonomy, letting her make her own choices. Over the following days, Arya fell into a routine. Mornings were for training with Garrison, afternoons for exploring the fortress, evenings for meals, sometimes alone, sometimes with Dominic. She had learned things about him gradually. He was 35 years old. He had been Alpha King for 12 years, taking the position after his father died in battle, defending Iron Peak from a rival pack. He had been mated once before to a human woman named Sarah. She had died of cancer 10 years ago, before Arya was even aware she was a shifter. I thought the moon goddesses gave mates once, Dominic said one evening over dinner. I thought Sarah was my only chance. But then I felt the bond with you, and I understood that sometimes there are second chances, rare, precious, not to be wasted. Arya did not know what to say to that. On day 8 of her stay, something changed during training. She was sparring with a young warrior named Devlin Cross, a cocky 25-year-old who clearly thought fighting a half-starved female would be easy. He lunged at her. Arya sidestepped faster than she had been able to move all week. She swept his legs out from under him. He crashed to the ground, shocked. The other warriors watching erupted in cheers. Arya stared at her own hands. She felt it then, her wolf awakening after 7 years of suppression. Not fighting to get out, just there, present, part of her again. That night she shifted in the private courtyard Dominic had designated for her use. Guards were posted at a distance to ensure her safety. But they gave her privacy. Her white wolf emerged easily this time. No pain, no struggle, just transformation. And for the first time in 7 years, Arya ran. She stretched. She simply existed in her true form without fear or suppression. It felt like coming home. Day 10. The conspiracy revealed. 10 days after arriving at Iron Peak, Dominic summoned Arya to his study. Beta Garrison was there along with Lieutenant Thaddeus Knox and Lieutenant Roxanne Flint, two of Dominic's most trusted officers. Maps and documents covered a large table. "We have been investigating Bloodstone," Dominic said without preamble, "and we have found something disturbing." He laid out several documents, bank records, emails, photographs. "Marcus Stone is not working alone," Garrison said. "He is part of a larger network, the Collectors Network. They buy and sell rare shifters. White wolves are their most valuable commodity." He pointed to an email chain. Marcus was communicating with someone he called Mr. V. "We have identified him as Victor Ashford, a billionaire who lives in Wyoming. He has a collection." Arya's blood ran cold. "What kind of collection?" Garrison hesitated. Dominic answered for him. "Pelts, taxidermy." "Victor Ashford collects rare shifter remains, the way some people collect art. Our intelligence suggests he has at least 47 white wolf specimens acquired over the past 50 years. The room spun. Arya gripped the edge of the table. "There is more," Dominic said quietly. He pulled out a photograph. It showed a group of hunters standing over dead wolves. The image was grainy, dated 7 years ago. But Arya recognized the location, the cabin in Colorado, her home, and the lead hunter had a tattoo on his forearm, a distinctive design, the Bloodstone Pack crest. "Marcus Stone hired the hunters who killed your family," Dominic said, his voice heavy. "He was paid by Victor Ashford to acquire white wolves. Your family was among their targets." Arya could not breathe. The room was closing in. All this time she had thought the hunters were random, opportunistic, but they had been sent specifically, paid to slaughter her family. "I want him dead," she whispered. "Both of them. Marcus and Victor. I want them dead." "So do I," Dominic said. "But we are going to do this the right way. With evidence, with the law. Victor is hosting a charity gala in 5 days. A big event. Politicians, business leaders, other alphas will attend. Garrison and I have been planning an operation." He looked at Arya. "We can infiltrate the gala, gather more evidence, get recordings of Victor discussing his crimes. Then we coordinate with FBI agent Nathaniel Morrison, who has been investigating the collector's network for years. We arrest Victor publicly, dismantle the entire operation. And Marcus, Arya asked, already under surveillance. The moment Victor goes down, we move on Bloodstone, free the prisoners, shut down the rings. Marcus will face justice for every person who died in that arena. Arya stared at the maps, at the photographs, at the evidence of a conspiracy that had destroyed her life and the lives of so many others. I want to go, she said, to the gala. I want to look Victor Ashford in the eye when you arrest him. Dominic shook his head. It is too dangerous. If he recognizes you. He will not, Arya interrupted. He has never seen me in human form as an adult. I was 16 when my family died. I'm 23 now. I will look completely different. Arya, do not tell me it is too dangerous, she said, her voice hard. You said you would not cage me, that you would not force me to hide, so do not start now. Dominic looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. All right, we go together, but we do this smart, careful, controlled. Days 11 to 14, training montage. The next 4 days were a blur of preparation, strategic planning sessions that reminded Arya why Dominic was king. He thought tactically, considering every contingency, preparing for every possibility. They would enter the gala, posing as Alpha Theron Blackthorn from Oregon and his mate Lady Arya. Fake identities, convincing backstories. Garrison would lead 50 warriors who would surround the estate perimeter. Agent Morrison would be on standby with FBI teams. The signal to move would be Arya's white wolf howl. When they had enough evidence, she would shift and all hell would break loose. But first, Arya needed to be ready, stronger, faster, combat trained. Garrison intensified her training schedule. Day 11. Endurance. Arya ran 10 miles through Iron Peak's mountain trails. Her white wolf form moved like liquid silver through the trees. By the end, she was tired but not broken. Progress. Day 12. Combat drills. Hand to hand. Combat with Garrison. He did not hold back. Arya took hits, learned to roll with the impacts. Fought back harder. By evening, she had landed 3 solid strikes that made Garrison grunt in surprise. You are getting better, he said, wiping blood from his split lip. Much better. Day 13. Wolf combat. Sparring in wolf form against 2 of Garrison's best warriors. Arya held her own for 4 minutes before they pinned her. But 4 minutes was 3 minutes longer than she had lasted 2 days ago. Day 14. Alpha Aura training. This was the breakthrough. Garrison had arranged for 15 warriors to stand in a circle around Arya. Try to command them, he said. White wolves are said to have natural dominance. See if you can access it. Arya shifted to wolf form. She focused on the connection she felt to her bloodline, the power that had been suppressed for 7 years. She growled, low, primal, ancient, and released her aura. Power exploded outward from her, a wave of pure alpha dominance that hit the warriors like a physical force. Their knees buckled. Every single one of them dropped to the ground, unable to resist their bodies, responding to a command older than conscious thought. Even Garrison had to brace himself, his legs shaking with the effort to remain standing. Arya pulled the aura back immediately, shocked. The warriors climbed to their feet looking shaken. What the hell was that? One of them asked. True alpha power, Garrison said, his voice filled with awe. White wolves can command any shifter. Dominic warned me, but I had to see it to believe it. That evening, Arya met with Dominic privately. They had been circling each other for 2 weeks, the mate bond, growing stronger every day, but both hesitant to acknowledge what it meant. After tomorrow, Arya said quietly, if we survive this, I will accept the bond, fully, completely. Dominic's eyes widened. You mean that? I do. You have given me space, safety. You have not tried to control me or cage me. You have stood beside me, not in front of me. That means something. Dominic crossed the room slowly. He cupped her face in his hands, gentle despite his obvious strength. Thank you, he said, for trusting me, for giving us a chance. He kissed her. The bond between them flared warm and right and inevitable. When they broke apart, Arya felt something she had not felt in 7 years. Peace. Tomorrow, we finish this, she said. Together. Together, Dominic agreed. Day 14 evening. Mid-crisis attack. At 2 in the morning, alarms blared throughout the fortress. Arya jolted awake in her rooms. Explosions echoed from the eastern wall. She ran to the window. Fire bloomed in the darkness. Warriors were mobilizing. An attack. Arya shifted without thinking and raced down the stairs. She emerged into chaos. 8 intruders had breached the wall using explosives. They were fighting Iron Peak warriors in the main courtyard. These were not random raiders. They were assassins, professionals, armed with guns loaded with silver bullets, and they were heading toward the keep, toward Arya's tower. Garrison appeared shouting orders. Protect the lady. They are here for her. 3 assassins broke through the defensive line. One raised his gun, aiming at Arya. She did not think. She just moved. Her white wolf form was faster than any of them expected. She closed the distance in 2 seconds and took this assassin down, jaws clamping on his gun arm. Bone crunched. He screamed. The second assassin fired. The bullet grazed her side, burning hot. She snarled and lunged, taking him down with brutal efficiency. The third hesitated, shocked by the white wolf's ferocity. That hesitation cost him. Dominic appeared from the keep entrance, moving with lethal speed, and snapped the man's neck with his bare hands. The fight lasted 8 more minutes. When it was over, 3 assassins were dead. 5 were captured alive. Arya shifted back to human form, breathing hard. Her side bled where the bullet had grazed her. Dominic was at her side, instantly stripping off his shirt and pressing it against the wound. You are hurt. I am fine. It is just a graze. Dr. Hayes arrived within minutes and confirmed it. The wound was superficial. She cleaned and bandaged it quickly, her hands steady despite the chaos. Garrison dragged one of the captured assassins forward, the man's face bloodied. This one is talking. Says Marcus sent them. Orders were to capture Lady Arya alive and kill anyone who interfered. Dominic's expression turned glacial. Interrogate them all. I want names, contacts, everything. Over the next hour, they extracted the full story using a combination of Alpha Command and strategic pressure. Marcus was working directly with Victor. They knew Arya was at Iron Peak. The plan had been to kidnap her during the night, deliver her to Victor before the gala, but there was more. Victor's gala was not just a charity event, it was an auction. He planned to sell Arya to the highest bidder, $50 million starting price. Multiple collectors had already submitted bids. One of the assassins under duress revealed something that made Arya's blood run cold. Victor said the girl was special, said she was from the Winters bloodline. He's been hunting that family for 30 years. When Dominic heard that, his fury was palpable. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Every wolf present felt the weight of their king's rage. But Arya felt something different. Not fear, not despair. Cold, focused fury. These men had killed her family, had caged her, had tried to kill her tonight, and they thought they could sell her like property, no more. We go to the gala, she said, her voice ice. Tomorrow as planned, and we end this. Dominic looked at her, saw the steel in her eyes, the determination that had been building over 2 weeks of recovery and training. Are you certain? I am done hiding, Arya said. I am done running. Victor Ashford wanted a white wolf. Now he is going to face one, and he is going to learn why my kind was feared. Dominic held her gaze. Then he nodded. Then we prepared for war. Agent Nathaniel Morrison arrived at dawn, having driven through the night after receiving Dominic's emergency call. He was 48 with grey at his temples and the bearing of a man who had seen too much. We have enough evidence to move now, Morrison said, reviewing the documents Garrison had compiled. But catching Victor at the gala with witnesses will make the case airtight. Multiple alphas present means the shifter community will support the arrest. No one can claim this is a political hit. Then we proceed as planned, Dominic said. He looked at Arya. Last chance to change your mind. Not a chance, she said. Day 18. Departure. The drive to Wyoming took 6 hours. Arya and Dominic rode in a black SUV with tinted windows. She wore the silver gown that had been tailored perfectly to her frame. Her hair was styled elegantly. She looked like royalty. She felt like a weapon. Garrison followed with 3 other vehicles, carrying warriors in formal attire. To anyone watching, they looked like a small delegation attending a high society event. No one could see the weapons, concealed beneath tailored jackets, the silver knives strapped to thighs, the tactical communication devices hidden in ears. 50 more warriors were already in Wyoming, positioned around the Ashford estate in a perimeter that would activate the moment Arya gave the signal. As they approached the estate, Arya's heart rate increased. This was it. The moment she had been moving toward since she woke up in that cage 3 months ago. The estate was massive. 40,000 square feet of stone and glass perched on a hilltop. Manicured lawns, sculptures, a circular driveway where luxury cars were dropping off guests dressed in glittering finery. They pulled up to the gate. A guard in a black suit checked a list on his tablet. Names: Alpha Theron Blackthorn and Lady Arya, Dominic said smoothly, using their fake identities. The guard scanned the list, found the names Garrison's tech team had inserted into the guest database, nodded. Welcome. Enjoy your evening. The gate opened. They drove through. Arya looked at Dominic. He met her eyes, and in that moment, the mate bond between them sang with shared purpose. Ready, ready, she said. They stepped out of the car. Dominic offered his arm. Arya took it, and together they walked toward the mansion's grand entrance. Inside waited Victor Ashford, the man who had killed her family, the man who thought he owned her. Tonight he would learn the truth. White wolves were not trophies to be collected. They were predators, and Arya Winters was done being prey. The Ashford estate blazed with light against the Wyoming darkness. Chandeliers glittered through floor-to-ceiling windows. Music drifted across the manicured lawns from a string orchestra positioned in the grand foyer. 200 guests mingled on the marble steps, all wearing designer gowns and tailored suits, all pretending they did not know what kind of man their host truly was. Arya took Dominic's arm as they climbed the steps. Her silver gown whispered against the stone. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but her face remained composed. She had learned to hide fear during 7 years of running. Tonight, that skill would serve her one last time. At the entrance, a man in a black suit checked their names against the tablet. He smiled professionally and gestured them inside with a practiced flourish. The foyer was enormous. White marble floors polished to a mirror shine. A grand staircase sweeping upward in elegant curves. Oil paintings in gilt frames covering the walls. Everything screamed wealth and power. And blood money, Arya thought. Every beautiful thing in this house was purchased with the lives of shifters like her family. A server approached with champagne on a silver tray. Dominic took 2 glasses, handed one to Arya. She held it but did not drink. She needed her mind sharp. They moved into the main ballroom. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow light across the crowd. An orchestra played Vivaldi in one corner. Long tables groaned under elaborate food displays. Guests clustered in small groups, talking, laughing, utterly oblivious to the monsters among them. Or perhaps not so oblivious. Arya recognized at least 15 shifters in the crowd by scent alone. Alphas from various packs scattered across the western territories. Most looked uncomfortable, as though attending under obligation rather than choice. Alpha Blackthorn. They turned. A tall man in his 40s approached, hand extended. He had the bearing of military training and the eyes of someone who had seen too much. Alpha Vincent Harding, the man said. Idaho Territory. I did not expect to see you here tonight. Dominic shook his hand. I received an invitation. It seemed diplomatic to attend. Vincent's gaze flicked to Arya, then away quickly, too quickly, as though he knew exactly who she was and did not want to acknowledge it. Quite the collection our host has, Vincent said carefully. I am told he will be showing off some of his acquisitions tonight. Is that so? Dominic's voice was neutral, but Arya felt him tense beside her. Indeed, if you will excuse me. Vincent moved away, disappearing into the crowd. He knows, Arya whispered. Probably, Dominic agreed. But he cannot act. Not here. Not publicly. He's as trapped by propriety as we are using it against Victor. They circulated it through the ballroom. Dominic greeted other alphas with polite detachment. Arya played her role perfectly. The quiet mate at her king's side, smiling at appropriate moments, saying little. But she was mapping the room. Exits, guard positions, windows, the layout of the estate, information that would matter when everything went to hell. Because it would go to hell. That was guaranteed. The only question was when. At 8:30, a ripple of attention moved through the crowd. Conversations quieted. Heads turned toward the grand staircase. Victor Ashford descended like a king entering court. He was 60 years old, with silver hair swept back from a patrician face. He wore an immaculate tuxedo and moved with the confidence of a man who had never faced consequences for his actions. His smile was warm and practiced. His eyes were dead. Arya's hands clenched into fists. The champagne glass trembled in her grip. Dominic's hand covered hers, a steadying pressure. Control, he murmured. Not yet. Victor reached the bottom of the stairs and spread his arms in welcome. My friends, he said, his voice carrying across the ballroom with practiced ease. Thank you all for joining me tonight. Your generosity supports important conservation efforts across the country. Together, we are making a difference. Polite applause rippled through the crowd. Arya wanted to scream. Conservation. The man collected dead shifters like trophies and called it conservation. Victor began working the room, greeting guests personally. He was moving toward them. Inevitable. Unavoidable. Arya felt ice crystallize in her veins. This was the man who had ordered her family's execution, who had paid hunters to slaughter a mother and 3 children, who thought he could collect her like the others. Alpha Blackthorn, Victor said, arriving in front of them. His smile was practiced perfection. What an unexpected pleasure. I did not realize you were on tonight's guest list. The last-minute addition, Dominic said smoothly. My mate and I were traveling through the area. It seemed rude to decline such a generous invitation. Victor's gaze moved to Arya. His eyes narrowed slightly, studying her face with the intensity of a collector examining a potential acquisition. For one terrible second, she thought he recognized her. Then he extended his hand. And you are Lady Arya, she said, her voice steady despite the scream building in her throat. She took his hand briefly. His skin was cold, dry, reptilian. Charming, Victor said, holding her gaze a moment longer than necessary. Have we met before? You seem familiar. I do not believe so, Arya replied, meeting his eyes without flinching. I would remember. Victor held her gaze another moment, then smiled again. Perhaps. In any case, welcome to my home. I hope you enjoy this evening's entertainment. I have something very special planned. He moved on to the next cluster of guests. Arya released a breath she had not realized she was holding. That was close, Dominic said quietly. Too close. They continued circulating. Garrison appeared briefly dressed in a server's uniform, carrying a tray of canapes. He passed near them without acknowledgement, but Arya caught his subtle nod. The warriors were in position. FBI teams were staged outside the gates. Agent Morrison was ready. Everything was in place. Now they just needed evidence, recordings, something concrete that would stand up in court and the court of public opinion. At 9 o'clock, Victor called for attention again. Ladies and gentlemen, if you would join me in the gallery, I have something extraordinary to share. The crowd moved toward a set of double doors at the far end of the ballroom. Arya and Dominic followed her pulse thundering in her ears. The gallery was a long, narrow room with track lighting and dark walls designed to showcase the displays. And mounted on those walls, framed like fine art, were pelts. Dozens of pelts, all white, all wolves. Arya stopped breathing. Each pelt was mounted on black velvet with a small brass plaque beneath. But the plaques did not list names. They listed only dates, locations, and estimated ages. A deliberate choice to dehumanize the victims. Her eyes found one near the center. The plaque read, Female, Colorado, October 2017, estimate age 38. But Arya knew. She recognized the distinctive silver-white pattern, slightly darker along the spine. The size, the shape, this was her mother. The world tilted. Dominic's arm around her waist was the only thing keeping her upright. She could feel him trembling with barely contained rage, but his face remained impassive. My life's work, Victor was saying, pride evident in his voice, as he gestured expansively at the display. The most complete collection of white wolf specimens in existence, acquired over 50 years through careful cultivation of relationships with skilled hunters. Each piece tells a story of patience and dedication to preserving these magnificent creatures. The guests murmured appreciatively. Some took photos with expensive cameras, others examined the pelts more closely, as if judging quality at an art exhibition. Arya's vision tunneled. Red crept in at the edges. Her wolf surged forward, demanding release, demanding blood, demanding justice for the atrocity surrounding her. Not yet, she told herself, every muscle locked with the effort of control. Not yet. Victor continued his tour, pointing out particularly prized specimens. He paused in front of the pelt Arya knew was her mother's. This one was especially difficult, he said, running his fingers along the velvet mounting with disturbing intimacy. The family was living deep off-grid. Took me 3 years to locate them, but the result was worth the effort. 6 specimens from a single pack. Exquisite quality. Arya made a sound, a small wounded noise that she could not contain. Several heads turned. Victor looked at her concerned. Are you all right, my dear? Overwhelmed, Dominic said quickly, his voice tight. My mate has a sensitive nature. Perhaps we should get some air. Of course, Victor said, though I hope you will return for the main event. At 10 o'clock I will be unveiling something truly unprecedented, a live acquisition, very rare. The words sent ice through Arya's veins. He had another white wolf, someone else scheduled to be displayed like property. Dominic led Arya out of the gallery and into a side corridor. She was shaking every breath a struggle. Her wolf thrashed inside her skin, desperate to break free and tear Victor apart. Breathe, Dominic said urgently. Arya, breathe! I know, I saw, but we need to hold together a little longer. We get the evidence. We save whoever he is planning to auction. Then we end him. But he killed them, she whispered. He killed my family and turned my mother into a decoration, into art. I know, and he will pay for it tonight. But we have to do this right. Garrison appeared from a doorway, still in his server disguise. We have a problem. There are guards posted outside a locked room on the 2nd floor. Heavy security. Agent Morrison thinks that is where Victor keeps his records. Physical evidence. We need access. Can you get in? Dominic asked. Not without alerting security. But Lady Arya could. Garrison looked at her. If you shifted and used your aura, the guards would have to submit. You could get the door open and we could secure the evidence. Arya straightened, pushing down the grief and rage, focusing on the mission. Where? East wing, 2nd floor, 3rd door on the left. Go, Dominic said. We will create a distraction in the ballroom. Draw attention away from you. Arya nodded. She slipped off her heels and moved quickly through the corridors, her bare feet silent on the marble. The estate was a maze, but she followed Garrison's directions, up a servant's staircase, through a narrow hallway lined with paintings of hunting scenes. She found the door. 2 guards stood outside both shifters, both armed with pistols holstered at their hips. They looked at her suspiciously as she approached in her evening gown. This area is restricted, one said. Arya did not answer. She simply shifted. The transformation was instant practice. One moment, a woman in a silver gown. The next, a massive white wolf standing in the corridor, the torn dress pulling around her paws. The guards' eyes widened. They reached for their weapons. Arya released her aura. Power exploded outward from her, a wave of pure alpha dominance that hit the guards like a physical force. Their knees buckled. They dropped to the floor, unable to resist, their weapons clattering away. Their bodies responded to a command older than conscious thought, older than pack loyalty. Arya padded forward and tried the door with her snout. Locked. She shifted back to human form, grabbed a hairpin from where it had fallen during her transformation, and picked the lock. A skill learned during 7 years of breaking into places to sleep or steal food. The door opened. Inside was an office. Filing cabinets lined one wall. A computer sat on an ornate desk. And on the walls, photographs, dozens of them. White wolves alive and dead. Families targeted. Locations marked. Arya shifted back to wolf form and howled. The signal, long and mournful and filled with fury. The sound carried through the entire estate. Within seconds, Garrison appeared with 4 warriors. They swept into the office and began pulling files, documents, hard drives, everything. "Got it," Garrison said, stuffing papers into a briefcase. "Go, get to the ballroom. We will secure the evidence and meet Morrison at the extraction point." Arya ran. She flew down the corridors in wolf form faster than any human and burst through the double doors into the ballroom. 200 guests turned to stare. Victor Ashford stood frozen at the base of the grand staircase, his face a mask of shock that quickly twisted into fury. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded, his cultured voice cracking. Arya shifted back to human form. She stood naked in the center of the ballroom, white hair flowing past her shoulders, blue eyes blazing with power and 7 years of accumulated rage. "I am Arya Winters," she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the room. 7 years ago, you paid hunters to murder my family. My father Jared, my mother Elena, my siblings Thomas, Caroline and Anna. The youngest was 9 years old. You killed them, you skinned them, and you hung their remains on your wall like trophies." Silence. Absolute silence. "Tonight," Arya continued, "that ends." The main doors burst open. FBI agent Nathaniel Morrison entered with 20 federal agents, all wearing tactical gear, all carrying weapons at the ready. "Victor Ashford," Morrison announced, his voice ringing with authority. "You are under arrest for 47 counts of murder conspiracy to commit murder racketeering, illegal trafficking of endangered species, and conspiracy to violate the Endangered Species Act." Victor's face went purple with rage. "You cannot do this. I have immunity, I have connections. Do you know who I am?" "Not anymore," Morrison said coldly. 2 agents burst forward with reinforced handcuffs. The ballroom erupted. Guests scrambled for exits. Some alphas shifted ready to fight or flee. Others backed away, wanting no part of what was happening. Dominic appeared at Arya's side, wrapping his jacket around her shoulders. "It is over," he said quietly, but it was not over. Victor's eyes locked on Arya. Even handcuffed, even facing life imprisonment, he still looked at her with greed and possessiveness. "You think you have won," he hissed. "You are mine. I paid for your family. I own you. You are just another specimen that got away." Something inside Arya snapped, but before she could move, Victor convulsed. His body began to shift, but something was wrong. His muscles bulged unnaturally. His bones cracked at wrong angles. "What did you do?" Morrison demanded, stepping back. "Serum," Victor gasped, his voice distorting. "Experimental. Makes me stronger, faster, better." His shift completed and the thing that emerged was monstrous. Not a wolf, something else. 400 pounds of distorted muscle and mutated bone. His eyes glowed red instead of natural amber. Foam dripped from his jaws. He broke the handcuffs like they were paper, the metal snapping with a sound like gunshots. FBI agents opened fire. Bullets hit him and bounced off or embedded shallowly. The serum had made his hide nearly impenetrable. Victor lunged at Arya with terrifying speed. Dominic intercepted him, shifting mid-leap into his massive black wolf form. The two wolves collided with bone-shaking force. They rolled across the marble floor, snarling and snapping claws, scrabbling for purchase. But Victor was stronger, unnatural strength granted by the experimental serum. He caught Dominic across the shoulder teeth, sinking deep through fur and muscle. Blood sprayed across white marble. Dominic yelped and went down, his leg buckling. Victor stood over him, preparing to deliver the killing blow to the Alpha King. Arya shifted. Her white wolf form exploded into being, and with it came her aura, not the controlled release she had used on the guards upstairs. Everything. Every ounce of alpha power in her bloodline. The accumulated dominance of generations of white wolves, suppressed for 7 years and now unleashed in a single devastating wave. The aura hit Victor like a tsunami. His monstrous body froze mid-lunge, every muscle locked. Even the serum could not override the primal command of a true alpha. His wolf, buried under mutation and chemicals, still recognized absolute dominance when it encountered it. Every shifter in the ballroom dropped to their knees, unable to stand under the weight of Arya's power. FBI agents, unaffected but stunned, stared as the white wolf stalked forward. Arya could kill him now, tear out his throat, watch him bleed out on the expensive marble, end the man who had destroyed her family and 46 others. She wanted to, her wolf demanded it. 7 years of pain and loss and fear screamed for vengeance. But she did not, because death would be too easy, too quick. She wanted him to live, to spend decades in a prison cell knowing that a white wolf had beaten him, had stood over him and chosen mercy over murder, had proven she was not a specimen or a trophy, but an alpha he could never control. That was the worst punishment she could give him. Arya stood over Victor's paralyzed form and growled, a long rumbling sound that promised eternal consequences if he ever escaped, ever threatened her or hers again. Then she stepped back and pulled her aura in. Victor collapsed, his mutated body reverting slowly to human form, the serum burning through his system. FBI agents swarmed forward with specialized restraints, chains reinforced with silver, a muzzle. They hauled Victor's barely conscious form away. Arya shifted back to human and ran to Dominic. He had shifted back too, his shoulder bleeding, heavily torn muscle visible through the wound. "I am all right," he said through gritted teeth, though his face was pale. "Just a flesh wound." "You are a terrible liar," Arya said, pressing Dominic's jacket against his shoulder to stop the bleeding. Medical personnel rushed in. They treated Dominic on-site, cleaning and bandaging the wound with practiced efficiency. It would heal quickly with his shifter metabolism, but it still hurt. Agent Morrison approached Arya. "We have enough evidence to put Victor away for multiple lifetimes. The documents your people retrieved, plus testimony from the victims' families, plus recordings we made of his confession just now. He will never see daylight again." "Good," Arya said. "What about Marcus Stone?" "Teams moved on Bloodstone 30 minutes ago. Your beta Wade is leading the operation. By morning, the fighting rings will be shut down and every prisoner freed." Across the ballroom, agents were taking statements from guests. Several alphas who had been aware of Victor's activities were being detained for questioning. The entire collector network was unraveling decades of crimes, finally coming to light. It was over, really over. Arya looked at Victor being dragged away by 6 agents. He was screaming curses, thrashing against his restraints, but he was beaten, finished. 7 years of running, 7 years of hiding, 3 months in a cage, 2 weeks of preparation, and now finally justice. 1 week later, Bloodstone liberation. Arya stood in the ruins of the Bloodstone fighting arena, watching smoke rise from the demolished cages. Dominic was beside her. His shoulder healed, his hand warm in hers. Garrison led 100 warriors through the compound, systematically destroying every cage, every cell, every tool of torment. The sound of sledgehammers against iron rang through the cold morning air. They had freed 47 prisoners from the cages and holding cells throughout the compound. Men, women, teenagers, all of them had been given immediate medical attention, food, warm clothes, and the option to join Iron Peak or return to their homes with financial support. Most chose to stay. Where else did they have to go? Their old lives had been stolen. Iron Peak offered something new. Cade Morrison was among them. The former champion fighter had been found in his quarters, chains around his ankles, scars covering his body. A broken man who had been waiting to be ordered to kill again. When Garrison freed him, Cade had collapsed, sobbing like a child. Now he stood at the entrance to the women's barracks, waiting with barely contained hope and terror. Arya had promised to help him find his sister. They found her in the third room, huddled in a corner. Bryn Morrison, 15 years old, thin and scared with bruises on her arms and fear in her eyes, but alive. The reunion lasted 10 minutes. Cade held his sister and cried while she clung to him, both of them broken, but together again, both of them finally free. "Thank you," Cade said to Arya when he could finally speak, his voice raw. "For everything, for stopping, for caring, for coming back." "You helped me," Arya replied. "In the arena. You hesitated when you saw what I was. That moment of mercy gave me time. It saved my life." Cade shook his head. "I should have refused to fight you, should have let them kill me rather than hurt another innocent person." "You were protecting your sister," Arya said firmly. "I understand that. And now you are both free. What you do with that freedom is up to you." Cade looked at Dominic. "I would like to serve if you will have me. I can fight. I am good at it. Let me use those skills for something that matters instead of something that destroys." Dominic studied him for a long moment. "You will have to earn trust. Prove you are no longer the weapon Marcus made you." "I will," Cade said, his voice filled with determination. "I swear it on Bryn's life." "Then welcome to Iron Peak." They spent the rest of the day dismantling Bloodstone. The fighting rings were burned to ash. The cages were melted down in industrial furnaces. The compound was bulldozed until nothing remained but scorched earth and bitter memories. Marcus Stone himself had been captured, trying to flee across the Canadian border with forged documents. He was extradited back to Montana, where he faced 23 counts of murder, human trafficking, racketeering, and conspiracy. The trial lasted 4 days. The jury deliberated for 40 minutes. Guilty on all counts. Sentence execution by lethal injection, scheduled for 6 months from conviction. News of Victor's arrest and Marcus's capture spread through the shifter community like wildfire. Alphas who had turned blind eyes to the collector network suddenly found their moral compasses. The FBI dismantled trafficking operations in 12 states. Hundreds of prisoners were freed. Dozens of collectors were arrested. And the white wolves in Victor's collection were penally laid to rest with dignity. Arya organized the ceremony herself. Each pelt was cremated with full honors, according to shifter tradition. Ashes were scattered in sacred groves throughout the territories. Songs were sung. Names were spoken for those who could be identified. When the pelt she knew was her mother's was laid on the funeral pyre, Arya stood beside it and said the words she had been holding for 7 years. "I am sorry I ran. I am sorry I left you, but I am not sorry I survived, and I am not sorry I made them pay. I hope you can see this. I hope you know justice was served." The flames consumed the remains. Smoke rose toward the winter sky. Dominic stood beside Arya, silent support, as she grieved properly, for the first time since that terrible night 7 years ago, when her entire world ended. 3 months later, coronation. 3 months after Victor's arrest, Iron Peak held a coronation ceremony. The Great Hall was filled with 500 guests. 20 alphas from across North America attended, all come to witness the formal bonding of their king to his white wolf mate. Arya wore a gown of silver and white custom designed to flow like water when she moved. A crown of platinum rested on her hair, shaped like wolf heads howling at the moon. She looked like something from legend, a queen from the old stories come to life. Elder Miriam Thornfield, the pack's high priestess, conducted the ceremony. She was 65 years old, with silver hair and eyes that had seen 7 decades of pack history. She had been skeptical of Arya at first, worried that a white wolf would bring chaos and violence. But Arya had proven herself through action, through advocacy, through using her position to make real change, instead of just accepting power. Now Miriam spoke the ancient words with genuine warmth, binding Arya and Dominic together officially in the eyes of Pack and Moon Goddess. Do you, Dominic Blackthorn, Alpha King of the Northern Territories, accept Arya Winters as your mate, your partner, your equal in all things? I do, Dominic said, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall. Do you, Arya Winters, White Wolf of the Winters bloodline, accept Dominic Blackthorn as your mate, your partner, your equal in all things? Arya looked at Dominic, at the man who had claimed her in an arena when she was dying, who had given her space to heal, who had stood beside her while she hunted the man who killed her family, who had never tried to cage her or control her or diminish her strength. I do, she said clearly. Miriam smiled, her weathered face crinkling with genuine joy. Then, by the power vested in me by the Moon Goddess and the laws of our kind, I declare you bonded, mates for life. King and Queen of the Northern Territories. The hall erupted in cheers and howls. Dominic cupped Arya's face and kissed her. The bond between them flared complete and absolute, and every wolf in the hall felt the rightness of it through the pack bonds that connected them all. This white wolf, who had been thrown into a fighting ring to die, was exactly the queen they needed, strong but compassionate, fierce but fair, a survivor who understood suffering and used her power to prevent others from enduring what she had endured. The celebration lasted until dawn. Music, dancing, feasting, joy that Iron Peak had not experienced in years. But eventually, the guests departed. The hall emptied, and Arya found herself alone with Dominic on the balcony overlooking the valley, watching the sun rise over the mountains. 7 years ago, Arya said quietly, I was 16 years old, running for my life through a forest while hunters murdered everyone I loved. 3 months ago, I was in a cage, starving and waiting to die in an arena. And now I am a queen. Dominic wrapped his arms around her from behind his chin, resting on her shoulder. You were always a queen. The world just needed time to recognize it. Arya leaned back against him. I still have nightmares about the cage, the arena, my family dying. I know, trauma does not disappear just because circumstances improve, but you are not alone anymore. You will never be alone again. Bess stood in silence, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of gold and pink, feeling the bond hum contentedly between them. What happens now? Arya asked. Now Dominic considered. Now we build something better. New laws protecting shifters, harsher penalties for trafficking, a sanctuary for white wolves, a network to identify and rescue prisoners before they end up in fighting rings. You wanted to make sure no one else endures what you endured. So we make that happen. But together, Arya said. Together, Dominic agreed. Epilogue. 5 years later, the White Wolf Sanctuary sprawled across 500 acres of protected wilderness in the Montana mountains, purchased with funds seized from Victor Ashford's estate. 32 white wolves lived there now, the largest concentration of the bloodline anywhere in North America. Some had been rescued from collectors. Others had been living in hiding like Arya once had, and finally found a place where they could exist openly without fear. The sanctuary was heavily guarded by warriors Arya personally trained. But it was also open with educational programs and visiting hours. White wolves were no longer hunted to near extinction. Thanks to new federal laws pushed through by Queen Arya Blackthorn, and Alpha King Dominic, killing or capturing a white wolf now carried a mandatory life sentence with no possibility of parole. The wolves were safe, protected, free. Arya walked through the sanctuary at dawn, her white wolf form moving silently between the trees. Other white wolves greeted her with respect and affection. Some were young, barely old enough to shift. Others were elders, who remembered when their kind numbered in the hundreds instead of dozens. At the center of the sanctuary stood a memorial, 47 stones arranged in a circle, each bearing a name of the victims from Victor's collection. In the center, a larger stone inscribed with the words, "Never forgotten, forever honored. May they run eternally in the moon goddess's hunting grounds." Arya sat before the memorial and howled, a song of remembrance, of grief transformed into purpose, of death honored and life celebrated. The other white wolves joined her, 32 voices, rising together, harmonizing a chorus of survival that echoed across the mountains. They sang for those who had died, and they sang for those who still lived, and they sang for a future where white wolves would never again be hunted to extinction. When the song ended, Arya shifted back to human form. She was 28 now, older, stronger, scarred but whole. Dominic appeared from the tree line, carrying clothes for her. 5 years together, and he still made her heart skip with that small smile that was just for her. "The council is meeting in 2 hours," he said, helping her dress. "They want to discuss expanding the sanctuary, adding another 500 acres. "Good," Arya said. "We will need the space." Lily reported 3 more white wolves in Nevada yesterday. She is bringing them here next month. Lily Whitmore, the young white wolf Victor had planned to auction that terrible night. She was 21 now, and Arya's right hand in running the sanctuary. Strong, smart, dedicated to ensuring no white wolf ever felt the fear she had experienced in Victor's cage. Also, Dominic said, with barely suppressed amusement, "Cade requested to speak with you about the patrol schedules. Again, I think he just likes having excuses to report to you." Cade Morrison had become one of Iron Peak's most trusted warriors. He led the sanctuary's security team with the same intensity he had once brought to the fighting rings, but now he fought to protect rather than destroy. Bryn, his sister, was 20 now and training to be a teacher. She wanted to work with the rescued prisoners, helping them adjust to normal life after trauma. Both siblings had found purpose in surviving, but there was more. As Arya and Dominic walked back toward the main compound, 2 small figures burst from the tree line, running at full speed. "Mama, Mama!" Little Elena and Caroline Blackthorn, 3 years old, shifted mid-run from wolf pups to human toddlers, their white fur dissolving into pale skin and silver hair. They crashed into Arya's legs, giggling and talking over each other. "Auntie Rebecca said we can help with the new wolves. Can we, Mama, please, Doctor?" Rebecca Hayes, now 60 years old, emerged from the medical clinic she ran at the sanctuary's entrance. She had delivered Arya and Dominic's twin daughters 3 years ago, had been there for every childhood illness, and scraped knee since. "They have been asking all morning," Rebecca said with a warm smile, persistent like their mother. Arya scooped up both daughters, one on each hip, marveling as she always did that these bright, fearless children were hers. That she had built a life where white wolves could be born without fear, could grow up knowing safety instead of hiding. "We will see," Arya told them. "First you need breakfast." The girls groaned, but allowed themselves to be carried toward the main building, chattering about the wolves and the forest and everything their young minds found fascinating. Garrison Wade met them at the entrance, now officially Dominic's second in command, after 5 years of distinguished service. His tactical mind had been invaluable in coordinating security across the expanded territories. "Your Majesty," he said to Arya with a respectful nod. "Agent Morrison called. Victor Ashford died in prison last night, heart attack in his cell." Arya stopped walking, felt something shift inside her. Not satisfaction exactly, just closure. How long did he last? 5 years and 2 months. Marcus Stone was executed 4 years ago, so Victor outlived him. "Good," Arya said quietly. "Let the collectors who are still alive know. Let them understand what happens to those who hunt white wolves." Later that day, after the council meeting and the endless administrative work that came with being queen, Arya took her daughters to visit the cemetery in Colorado. Every year, on October 10th, the anniversary of her family's death, she made this pilgrimage. And now that Elena and Caroline were old enough, she brought them too. 6 headstones stood beneath the pine trees. Jared Winters, Elena Winters, Thomas Winters, Caroline Winters, Anna Winters, and the memorial stone for the 47 white wolves who had died at collectors' hands. Arya knelt in front of her mother's grave. Her daughters settled on either side of her quiet for once, sensing the importance of this moment. "These are your grandparents," Arya told them softly. "Your aunts and uncle. They died before you were born, but they would have loved you so much." "Why did they die, Mama?" little Elena asked. "Because bad people hurt them. But those bad people are gone now, and I made sure that what happened to our family will never happen to anyone else." "You are very brave, Mama," Caroline said seriously. Arya pulled both girls close. "I survived because I had to, because giving up would have meant they died for nothing. But you too, you get to live without fear. That is what I fought for." Dominic stood nearby, giving Arya space for this private moment, but close enough to offer support when needed. After 5 years, he knew her rhythms, knew when she needed solitude and when she needed comfort. When Arya finished speaking to her family's graves, she scooped up both daughters and carried them back to the car. "Mama, tell us the story again," little Elena said as they drove away. "About the fighting ring. You are too young for that story," Arya said, though she smiled. "But you survived," Caroline insisted. "You shifted and the king claimed you and you became queen." Arya glanced at Dominic, who was driving. He caught her eye and smiled. "Someday when you are older, I will tell you the whole story," Arya promised. "But for now, just know, this being strong does not mean never being afraid. It means fighting even when you are afraid. It means standing up when everything in you wants to run. And it means protecting others once you have the power to do so." The twins nodded seriously, already fierce despite their young age. As they drove away from the cemetery, Arya looked back one last time at the 6 headstones standing beneath the pines. She had been thrown into a fighting ring as prey expected to die in seconds. Instead, she had transformed to survive. The Alpha King had claimed her. And together, they had built a life worth living, a family worth protecting, a future worth fighting for. Marcus Stone had died by lethal injection. Victor Ashford had died alone in a cell. The collector network was dismantled. The white wolves were protected. Justice, though delayed, had finally been served, and Arya Winters Blackthorn, White Wolf Queen of the Northern Territories, stood watch over it all, ensuring that the nightmares of her past would never become anyone else's present. She still had scars, still had nightmares sometimes, still felt the phantom weight of cage bars on her skin. But she also had Dominic, had her daughters, had a sanctuary full of white wolves living freely, had laws that protected instead of condemned, had justice for her family. It was not perfect. Trauma never fully healed, but it was enough, more than enough. It was everything. And as the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Arya Winters Blackthorn smiled. She had survived, she had thrived, and she had made damn sure that her survival meant something. That was all any survivor could hope for. And sometimes when the world allowed it, that was exactly what they got.